Okay, hello, mic check 1, 2, 3. Okay, here we are. I had to delete the link of the previous stream because I named it as Alchemist. Cool. Now we shall start again with the book authored by Ravish Kumar. वालेकुम अस्सलाम सिनेमैन. Hopefully आप अच्छे होंगे, खैरियत से होंगे. You are doing good. आज गलती से आइसक्रीम खा ली. नेवर थॉट इससे मेरे गले का क्या हाल होगा. I am really feeling it now. I am really sorry. इसके लिए I picked up my little Kindle. Ravish Kumar is there waiting. गलती से आइसक्रीम खा ली थी आज. गला बैठ गया, क्या कर सकते हैं. फरमाते हैं कि मैं ख्वाहिशों के अजाब लेकर चला गया हूँ. वो दिल वो खाना खराब लेकर चला गया हूँ. मैं छोड़कर अपनी राह तकती उदास आंखें. जो बच गए थे वो ख्वाब लेकर चला गया हूँ. जिस पे मैंने मोहब्बतों की वही लिखी थी. जिस पे मैंने मोहब्बतों की वही लिखी थी. वो एक ममनून किताब लेकर चला गया हूँ. बस एक अज़ल को सुना गया हूँ जो दास्तां थी. मैं जिंदगी से हिसाब लेकर चला गया हूँ. मैं काफिलों को दिखा गया हूँ निशान मंजिल. मैं काफिलों को दिखा गया हूँ निशान मंजिल. मैं रास्तों के सराब लेकर चला गया हूँ. इन्हें कहो कि मैं ढूंढने से नहीं मिलूंगा. इन्हें कहो कि मैं ढूंढने से नहीं मिलूंगा. मैं गर्दे राह की नकाब लेकर चला गया हूँ. हेलो स्नेबा, वेलकम टू द स्ट्रीम. वालेकुम अस्सलाम आइनैन, वेलकम टू द स्ट्रीम. So I'm just going to paste this link on Twitter. उसके बाद we'll continue with Ravish Kumar. तो एक किस्सा सुनाऊंगा उससे पहले मैं लिंक पेस्ट कर रहा हूँ. एक सेकंड. मेरा लैपटॉप एज ऑलवेज. चलिए, हो गया ये काम. अब चलते हैं लाइव स्ट्रीम पे. ओके, सो एक किस्सा यूं है कि आई वाज जस्ट having an intuition कि I am going to write something. It's way back in 2020 perhaps or 2019, कुछ ऐसा ही है. So I was thinking to write about something, about a topic, and it was coming. मतलब ऐसे सोच रहा था कि लिखूंगा, अभी लिखूंगा. तो हुआ यूं कि मैं बाजार चला गया. मुझे कुछ तरकारियां, सब्जी वगैरह ये खरीदना था. तो मुझे भिंडी बहुत पसंद है. तो मैं जो ही सब्जी वाले के पास पहुंचा, उसको मैंने कहा भिंडी कैसे. आई थिंक मुझे याद है 40 कुछ ऐसा था रेट उसका। तो मैंने कहा 1-2 केजी रख दो, तो जो उसने रख दिया, मेरी तरफ हाथ बढ़ाने लगा, तो फ़ौरन अचानक से आई डोंट नो वेयर इट केम फ्रॉम। वालेकुम अस्सलाम व रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकातुहू, लुकमान शफ़ी। आई डोंट नो कैसा इम्पल्स आया कि मैं लिखने बैठ गया। किस पे? शाओमी फ़ोन जो होते हैं उनमें अंदर वो नोट्स का अच्छा-सा एप्लीकेशन ने सिस्टम सॉफ्टवेयर में वही से दी होती है। तो उस पे आप आराम से नोट्स लिख सकते हो, तो मैं उस पे लिखने लग गया। तो वो मुझे पुकारने लगा, कहीं न कहीं मेरे कान सुन रहे थे उसको, मगर मेरी परसेप्टिवनेस ऐसी थी कि मतलब जवाब दूँ ना दूँ, मैं लिख रहा हूँ। शुड आई आंसर हिम? शुड आई आंसर हिज़ कॉल और नॉट? बट आई डोंट नो व्हाई मैंने उसको जवाब ना दिया और मैंने लिखना कंटिन्यू किया। तो नहीं, नहीं, भिंडी पे नहीं लिखना था। लिखना किसी और पे था, पता नहीं क्या लिख रहा था मैं उस टाइम, किस कोई सब्जेक्ट था उस टाइम। तो मैं लिखते चला गया। आई थिंक वो एक गज़ल थी, गज़ल बन गई थी। मैंने उसको कभी सुधारा नहीं, उसमें कोई चेंज नहीं लाई, क्योंकि वो मुझे लगा ये नेचुरली आई है, तो इसको नेचुरल ही रहने देते हैं। लेट्स नॉट चेंज इट, लेट्स नॉट ऐड वर्ड्स टू इट, रदीफ़ा और हम काफ़िया वगैरह वो सब कुछ इसमें चेंज कर दो, लुगात में लफ्ज़ ढूँढो वगैरह, वगैरह, ताकि लोग इसको पढ़ के पागल हो जाएँ, इसने लिखा क्या है? और लोग बड़े इंटरेस्टिंगली उसको समझे कि ये कोई इंटेलेक्ट है जिसने ये लिखी। नहीं, वैसा नहीं है। तो मैंने उसको वैसे ही रहने दिया जैसे वो था। तो हाँ, हाँ, मैं वो चंद कुछ लाइन्स थी, आई डोंट रिमेंबर वो, आई थिंक वो यहीं पे होंगी कहीं न कहीं। तो वो ढूँढ के मैं आपको सुनाता हूँ। वो ऐसे ही रॉ थॉट था, मैंने उसको रॉ ही रखा। Usually what do poets do is that they actually write the lines, then they make out of the subject out of it, फिर उसके बाद लाइन्स लिखते रहते हैं, पोएम्स, मिसरे वगैरह वो सब बहुत कुछ देखते रहते हैं क्या बनेगा इसका, उस पे बहुत मेहनत करते हैं 1-2 महीने, फिर जाके वो पोएम, नज़म, गज़ल वगैरह बन जाती। तो मैंने उसको वैसे ही रहने दिया। मुझे लगा ये ऐसे ही ठीक है, मैं इसको क्यों चेंज करूँ? तो ऐसे था वो कि बस मिलना चाहिए, लिखा बहुत सारा है तो उसमें से एक है वो, ये है। आई थिंक ये हाँ, हुँ, ये 3 कपलेट है, तो 3 मिसरे हैं ये। हुँ, बहुत ही रॉ थॉट है ये और बिल्कुल सैल-ए-मुतला में है, यानी कि आप यूँ समझिए कि कोई रेलवे की ट्रेन में चढ़ के वो जो कुछ बेच रहा होता है और जो वो लाइन्स बोल रहा होता है, तो ये उसी तर्ज में है। तो यूँ लिखा है कि मैं अपनी दबी हुई हिचकियों से उन्हें पुकारने की कोशिश करती हूँ। मैं अपनी दबी हुई हिचकियों से उन्हें पुकारने की कोशिश करती हूँ। जवाब तो नहीं देते, हाँ बस इंतज़ार करती रहती हूँ। मैं अपनी दबी हुई हिचकियों से उन्हें पुकारने की कोशिश करती हूँ। जवाब तो नहीं देते, हाँ बस इंतज़ार करती रहती हूँ। मेरे मसीहा को मेरा ज़रा भी एतबार नहीं, मेरे मसीहा को मेरा ज़रा भी एतबार नहीं, पर मैं उनके नाम की आरती बार-बार करती रहती हूँ। मैं अपनी दबी हुई हिचकियों से उन्हें पुकारने की कोशिश करती हूँ। जवाब तो नहीं देते, हाँ बस इंतज़ार करती रहती हूँ। मेरे मसीहा को मेरे मसीहा को मेरा ज़रा भी एतबार नहीं, पर मैं उनके नाम की आरती बार बार करती रहती हूँ। कोई जो पूछे मुझसे कि कौन है वो तेरा, कोई जो कोई जो पूछे मुझसे कि कौन है वो तेरा, ये सवाल सुनकर अश्कों की बारिश हजार बार करती रहती हूँ। मैं अपनी दबी हुई हिचकियों से उन्हें पुकारने की कोशिश करती हूँ। जवाब तो नहीं देते। हाँ, बस इंतजार करती रहती हूँ। ये बस मैं इसको चाहता तो पूरी गजल बना देता, अच्छे से संवारता, इसको सजाता और इसमें लुगात के डिफरेंट डिफरेंट अल्फाज लाता और उसमें डाल देता, और फिर जाके लगती कि ये एक मैच्योर पोएट की पोयम है। वो सब मैंने नहीं किया, चूंकि रॉ थॉट था, रॉ रहने दिया। हाँ, तो चलिए हम रवीश कुमार को आज स्टार्ट करते हैं फिर से। थैंक यू, थैंक यू, थैंक यू एवरीवन। तो हमने वी हैव एक्चुअली कंप्लीटेड एल्केमिस्ट, ठीक है ना। तो वी वर आल्सो रीडिंग रवीश कुमार्स बुक। तो कंटिन्यू करते हैं जैसा कल आपने कहा था कंटिन्यू करने के लिए। ओके, लेट अस स्टार्ट विद इट। रवीश कुमार की ये बुक है फ्रीडम। मैं एग्जैक्ट नाम बता देता हूँ आपको, वेट। ये बड़ी रियलिस्टिक बुक है, ये कोई एल्केमिस्ट जैसी बुक नहीं है। तो मुझे बहुत पसंद है ये बुक। कहीं ना कहीं ये बुक भी फ्रीडम, फ्री वॉइस ऑन डेमोक्रेसी, कल्चर एंड द नेशन। तो कहीं ना कहीं मुझे लगता है दिस टू कंट्रीब्यूटेड to the popularity, or we can say this two contributed to the award that was won by Ravish Kumar, रमन मगससा अवार्ड जो उन्होंने जीता था। तो कंटिन्यू करते हैं हम जहां पे हमने छोड़ी थी। He has written about his ordeal in the caravan. There is one man in Bassett's terrifying account who stands out above everyone else, a lawyer. This presence is an unmistakable one, one in most incidents of mob violence nowadays. In a way, he can be described as a legal empowerment cell for the mob. Several such incidents involving lawyers in recent times come to mind. For instance, in Feb 2016, two journalists from Indian Express, Alok Singh and Kaunan Sharif, were covering the sedition case against Kanaya Kumar, former president of the Jawaharlal Nehru University Students' Union. When they were accused of being anti national and attacked by lawyers inside the Patiala House Court complex in Delhi. We will perhaps never know what really transpired there. Then, in Kochi, July 2016, journalists at the Kerala High Court were prevented from covering a case involving a government pleader by a violent mob of lawyers. What KB Kolivad, the Speaker of the Karnataka Assembly, did in June 2017, sentencing the editors of the Yelahanka Voice and High Bangalore to a prison term of 1 year and imposing a fine of rupees 10,000 each for publishing defamatory articles against legislators, was also just one more example among many of browbeating. And consider what Asad Ashraf, Anupam Pandey, and Vinay Pandey, journalists who were arrested in Hanumangarh while investigating arms training camps allegedly being conducted by the Bajrang Dal, had to endure in Rajasthan. The policeman who said, "I'll be suspended from the force today, but I will still beat you with my shoes," was emboldened only because he knew that the authority which managed the national project for instilling fear is his political lord and master and has his back. The national project for instilling fear has reached completion in India. Before new highways and jobs, everybody has been unfailingly given one thing, that is fear. For every individual, whether a journalist or anyone else, fear is now a daily reality and we are all experiencing it in many different ways. From the moment we step out of our homes, warning rings in our ears. Be careful. Look here. Look there. It is obvious that the Godi media is the only one which is safe in India today. If you jump into the lap of authority and snuggle down it, nobody anywhere will dare to say anything to you. All you need to do is to lose yourself in songs of devotion, strum the tanpura like Narada did, and chant Narayan, Narayan on the television screen. Let me tell you about an incident about a friend who was traveling by the train with his mother. A woman of conservative views, she was wearing a burqa. A mob formed instantaneously and spewed taunts at them throughout the duration of the journey. Their self confidence was shattered within the first couple of hours. In this project for instilling fear, which is now being successfully implemented on a national scale, individuals comprise the smallest and the most vulnerable units. And now the project has reached the newsrooms and individuals within it too. I have no idea how the situation will improve. Maybe we can create a helpline for those who have been beaten up and for the families of those who have died. Certain sections of the mainstream media have always been in the firing line of hate mongers. It's now also the turn of many of our comrades practicing alternative journalism to become targets. Those who are running small websites with a handful of journalists. These are the websites that receive maybe a lakh or 2 or 5 lakh hits. When all mainstream voices are muzzled, it's these websites which report incidents. These journalists too are going to be beaten senseless. All this is happening systematically as part of the political game plan. Many local political agents who play the role of vendors, feeding information through WhatsApp, are now in the business of killing as well. Once gathering 10 men to beat someone to death used to take time. In Basit Malik's case, it would have taken no time to assemble a crowd because they have the perfect apparatus, WhatsApp, which rules out field reporting for most. I speak from experience. In the days following demonetization, it became very difficult to go anywhere to report from the field. You are not going to travel with a squad of Special Protection Group personnel, SPGP, right? Under these circumstances, where is one to go and, in the minimum time, accomplish the task of speaking to as many as people as possible? It is up to us to find a way of dealing with this fear. It has become necessary to tell people what you are watching on television is garbage. You are not being ready to kill Muslims. One day you will be used to kill just about anybody. Convert every person into a mob, into a possible killer. This too is an ongoing project. We are not just fighting against the muzzling of a debate, so essential to our democracy. Our problem is that very soon we will not be able to step out, even in our own neighborhood. You may think a person who is a well known face is at greater risk. Was Basit Malik a well known face? We have reached a stage where, at the mere sight of the Urdu script written somewhere, we will start trashing it on the grounds that it is a Pakistani language. The fact that many journalists did not attend the solidarity meeting for Basit Malik gave those of us who had gathered a deal of concern. Their lack of response made us feel that there is a pact of silence about incidents such as these. I often find myself in the midst of many such journalists and I detect no unease, no restlessness in them. It's a warning sign, when an assault on a colleague leaves you unmoved, for it means that even the basic spirit of solidarity is lost to us. At that time, when Basit Malik was attacked, it felt as if what we needed was a weekly calendar of meetings to protest assaults on journalists. So regularly they had become. And a chilling fear set in that we would soon be seeing each other at condolence meetings. Then on 5th of September 2017, Gauri Lankesh, journalist, activist, and editor of the Kannada weekly Lankesh Patrik, was shot down by bike-borne assailants in front of her own house in Bangalore. The motive for that murder wasn't clear then, and perhaps we will never know it. From that time, from the time that news arrived, I began to notice how many murderers there are among us. On the timelines on social media and Twitter emerged a horde of murderers and those who support that mindset which endorses murder, who without shame, hesitation, or a sense of boundaries attached towards various questions as riders to her murder and termed it legitimate. That horde brought up the questions of Pandits in Kashmir, the questions of the killings of RSS workers in Kerala. That horde demanded answers to each question before the answer to the murder could be sought. And while efforts were being made to distract from the issue at hand, what was important for us to do was to stay united and concentrate on the question of Gauri Lankesh's murder and make demands of the authorities. Would the crime be investigated? Would Siddharamaiah, the chief minister of Karnataka, do that? But he had done nothing about the killing of M. Kalburgi, the noted scholar and academic, former vice chancellor of the Kannada University and a strident voice against superstition in Hinduism. Had Siddharamaya wanted, he could have fought openly on the front lines and ensured that the Kalburgi case was professionally investigated and reached to its logical conclusion. He didn't, which also didn't mean that those in power in neighboring Maharashtra had done any better in any matters of the murder of the Narendra Dabolkar and Govind Pansare, the well-known rationalists and advocates of reforms in the Hindu religion. It is depressingly clear that the government parceled out among whichever parties is ranged against us all. I don't think it has ever happened anywhere that so many people have publicly justified a murder as vociferously and boldly and with as much poison as Gauri Lankesh's was. And I was saddened most of all by the fact that the man who had been lovingly given the seat of power by the people of India, that man was a Twitter follower of Nikhil Dadich, who described Gauri Lankesh, a recently deceased woman, as a bitch. Dadich said in a tweet, "Now that a bitch has died a dog's death, all the puppies were meowing in one voice." I was disappointed in our Prime Minister. Our Prime Minister can have any number of complaints about this country, but he cannot complain that Indian citizens have held anything back in how they have granted him power. The citizenry has given him the sort of majority that he demanded of them, even more, in every state and in every place. I wanted our Prime Minister to tell us how he came to that point, when he can barely afford to sleep a few hours in his quest to serve the nation, as his propaganda team tells us. How does he find the time to follow people like Dadich on Twitter? I also hope that whenever he returned from his travels at time, he should unfollow Dadich. He never did. We should all, as citizens of the country, ask the following questions to our Prime Minister. Why do you follow Dadich? What does he contribute that the 30% of the population which voted for you cannot? Is it this man or someone like him who makes you victorious? Is such a man necessary for you to reach that position of power? And now that Dadich and others like him are in the club of 1700 whom you follow on Twitter, can you not ask them, did you boys have no sense of dignity? The Prime Minister of the nation. If he cannot find anyone else in India to follow on Twitter, I offer Prime Minister my handle. He can follow me. I assure him that I will criticize him with great respect. He will never feel that I have insulted him. I will quote beautiful poems to him and many shloks from the Hindu scriptures. He will not feel at all that he lives in an India where he is not held in esteem. Someone at the condolence meeting for Gauri Lankesh asked me, "What are you here for?" We hadn't gathered there for ourselves. We were there because the message that was being sent out to everyone by killing Gauri Lankesh was that we should all keep quiet and we would meet the same fate as her. We gather to condemn a society which will look upon a corpse laid out before it and laugh. We gather to assert that this is not our way. It is not the way of the India we know. We gather to resolve that we send this message clearly to whichever government is in power up there, and to tell ourselves that this is something that they must listen to and understand. We gather to find ways so that we do not have to come together time and again to offer condolences and tributes. We had gathered to share our deep concerns and fears. We had also gathered to examine the many ways we were drifting away and see the harm that would come with disunity. We were there to understand that to cast a veil upon the doings of the government from a sense of political and ideological loyalties is not a good thing. We were there also to hold guilty those who protest only for the sake of protesting and those who support only for the sake of supporting. We were there to remind ourselves that despite the best efforts of the national project of instilling fear, we should not give in. For a few days after Gauri was murdered, I walked around terrified. It felt as if someone had riddled me with bullets and people were shuffling past my corpse. Numerous well wishers, readers, and viewers from all over the country called me, telling me to stop being a lone voice. You will meet the same fate. Write to the Home Minister and the Prime Minister, ask for security. I wanted to tell them, Are bhai, when they haven't been able to provide security even to their own Tories, how will I receive any? A particular kind of political atmosphere has been created through the national project for instilling fear, which offers divisive forces all kinds of supports. All of those who were laughing at the killing of the Gauri Lankesh are a product of that atmosphere. This is a shameful development, which face, which facet of the Hinduvita is this, that a brave, idealistic, and peaceful person is killed and we laugh and say that she was a bitch who deserved to die. That is what same section of the society which said nothing in support of the two women who spoke against Gurmeet Ram Rahim. Can we name any secretary of Women's Commission who supported those two women? Do we know any minister, soldier, general secretary who tweeted about these two women? It was thanks to the battles waged by them that the empire of such a powerful Baba was destroyed. But our society and the responsible people within it support the sentiment of the Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, save daughters, educate daughters, only at the level of a slogan. We must also never forget that the journalist who was murdered was a woman. In this country, it is with great difficulty that a few women reach that position from where they, with the keenness of their views, can show a mirror to society and to the government. For Gauri to reach that point for after a long battle and for her to be cut down at that point was naturally an immense waste of a talent. When even those who follow and support the Prime Minister and who are in turn endorsed by him and do not heed his dignity know that a mob of lunatics armed with manufactured opinions and primed by fake news has risen amongst us. That mob will surround us and kill us, whether we are alone or we number in the thousands. The question is not of personal survival, that is there, obviously, but of the citizens out there who fight a daily battle to get themselves heard on prime time, who want their questions to be raised, their ideals reinforced, whose voices are being drowned in the din of the fake news and spurious issues, whose questions are being ignored and whose restlessness is being quelled. People's desires and aspirations are being constantly murdered. Fake news, incidentally, was what Gauri Lankesh's final editorial spoke of. about how fake news is not only a Delhi centric phenomenon but is creating havoc in the states too, where it is steadily dividing people into the binary of Hindu and Muslim. We must understand the deadly patterns of fear and violence and hate that are being woven around all of us, for they are what Gauri Lankesh fell prey to, a brave journalist. Then comes the next chapter. Wherever a mob gathers is Hitler's Germany. I wrote this essay soon after 4th of July 2017, the day Prime Minister Modi visited Yad Vashem Holocaust Memorial on his official tour of Israel. We should be grateful that he did. With his visit, the Prime Minister not only offered tributes to the Jews who were massacred during the fateful time, he also dismissed the legacy of the murderer Hitler. When the heads of the state visit other countries, the visit is not only for their own sakes. Citizens also have a chance to learn much. I myself was particularly grateful because after his visit, I found the opportunity to read extensively about this important chapter in modern history, especially one specific episode within it, and I understand its significance as a cautionary tale, both for contemporary India and world. To read and understand this chapter is important, particularly for the young. I think for these events happened much before they were born, and we must all realize that those of us who do not learn lessons from history will become assassins for the history that is yet to be recorded. Of all the nights in Germany, the one between November 9th and 10th, 1938, was one of the ghastliest. The Crystal Night and the Night of the Broken Glass. That was the night when the fully planned campaign to persecute Jews was put into motion on the ground, to massacre them, to take away everything that they owned, to force them out from the country. In the years leading up to 1938, concerted programs had been set up to drive Jewish businessmen and traders out of Germany. Jewish doctors and lawyers were financially boycotted. Jews were ordered to write the letter J on their passports. Men were ordered to add Israel to their names, and women Sarah, so that they could be easily identified as being Jewish. The professors of the University of Germany also played an active role in the spreading of the hatred. In their classroom, they taught character and psychological analysis of Jews, which painted them in an evil light. The bureaucracy kept busy issuing bills which would identify Jews or wipe out their fundamental rights. Police would arrest anyone who spoke in favor of the Jews. Jews were forbidden for being entering the public parks in the city. People stopped patronizing stores owned by Jews. Shop fronts were marked to identify their owners as Jews. Coaches and trains were segregated. Germany had always been an integrated community in which Jews lived along with everyone else. Plans were made to pluck them out and send them into the ghettos outside the city. Ghettos, which, in a cruel irony, wealthy Jews would eventually be made to pay for. Insurance companies were ordered not to compensate Jews for damage to their houses, shops, and stores. Efforts were made to isolate Jews in every which way so that the mob, which was out to get them, would find it easy. There were the many grave but scattered and diverse incidents of violence which had been taking place in the years leading up to 1938. Some people supported these incidents, others opposed them, and in the acts of the support and protest, the populace was being numbed to violence and being prepared mentally to become murderers of the future and fulfill the propaganda that was being fed by them. By then, the many Germans had started taking pride in becoming a part of the different armies and organizations and shouting, Hail Hitler! Hitler. They had become the Bhakts of Hitler, and he had injected the poison of violence in their minds. Hitler's own obsession had become the people's obsession, and Hitler himself had to do nothing, and German people would do everything. All that Hitler and his government needed to do was to allow people to act as they please. Now, अक्लमंद के लिए इशारा काफी है. These things are right now going on. Exactly, ऐसे ही हो रहा है. We should be very clear that in the next decade we are going to face an extremely sensitive clash. और जो हो रहा है अभी रवीश कुमार पहले ही आज से 5 साल पहले इसको प्रिडिक्ट कर रहे हैं, one which has not been ever heard about. This is not a clash only of nations, but also a struggle with the ideologies of Jews, Freemasons, Marxists, and the Church. I believe that the soul of these powers resided in the Jews, who are the root of all negativity. The Jews believe that if Germany and the Italy are not destroyed, they will themselves be annihilated. This is a question that has remained before us for many years. We will force the Jews out of Germany. We will inflict such cruelty upon them as has never ever been imagined by anyone. Himmler, one of the leaders of the SS, proclaimed this in a speech to other leaders of the organization a few days before the events of 9th and 10th of November 1938, so that they too could be primed for violence against the Jews. Hitler's whip smart and murderous propaganda manager Joseph Goebbels was to rely the news about the violence back to Hitler. Hitler's silence and the occasional verbal order to intensify the campaign were to serve as directions to the governmental machinery that the massacre should be allowed to continue. The executors of the campaign were the mob of the SS, an army whose youthful members had been shown, along with everyone else, dreams of a grand Germany, a superpower Germany, a Germany, the emperor of Europe. कुछ समझ आ रहा है? Walaikum assalam, Mudassir. This thing is happening. On the night of 7th November 1938, the third legation secretary of Germany, Ernest von Rath, was murdered in Paris. The assassin was Herschel Greenspan, a Jew of the Polish origin. For Goebbels, it was as if the gods in the heavens had accepted his prayers. The fuse had long been smoldering. All that was needed was a wind to fan it to life, and they had found it. Goebbels wrote in his diary that night, I attend a party program in the old town hall. This there is a large crowd. I explain all of Hitler's thoughts to them. He decides that demonstration against Jews should carry on, says the police should be ordered to back down. Let the Jews face the people's rage. I urgently issued orders to the police and the party. I then speak for a little while at the party program. There is much applause. I then immediately pick up the phone. Now the phone will go to work. Now the people will go to work. The mob was let loose. Not only was the police ordered to step aside, while being made the nodal agency of the massacre in the cases where Jewish owned stores were to be burned down and they were to take owners into protective custody so that the arson could be carried out properly. The fire services were ordered to ignore the burning houses belonging to Jews and to douse the houses next door to them with water so that the property belonging to the people of Aryan origins could be preserved. This too is happening. ये हो रहा है अभी. Everything was arranged in such a manner that it would seem as if this was a natural, spontaneous anger on the part of the people, so that no blame could be laid on the governments or the police forces doorsteps. This too is happening. The game which was played in the name of the people's anger smeared blood on the face of the history which he has yet not washed off. And this happened in an age when modernism was in its vibrant youth in Europe, and the idea of democracy was being feted and paraded. Hundreds of Jews were murdered that night. Women and children were grievously injured. Nearly 100 places of worship were destroyed. On the night of the 9th November, the Munich synagogue was burned down by the Nazi army. The excuse given was that the synagogue was obstructing traffic. This too is happening. 15 synagogues were burned down in the Berlin alone. Cemeteries were attacked. Thousands of shops and the stores were burned down. Countless apartments were reduced to rubble. The pavements of the last cities in Germany were strewn with shattered glasses. So were the streets in front of the shops. Everything, every object associated with the memory of the Jews was destroyed, even their private photographs. ये भी हो रहा है. Many men and women committed suicide. Many were injured who later died. The police forcibly pushed 30,000 Jew men out of the country and into concentration camps. Since there wasn't enough space, only men and wealthy Jews were picked up. That night, when Goebbels returned to his hotel room, sound of the shattering windows could be heard. He wrote in his diary, "Excellent work, excellent work." He also wrote, "The German people will forever remember what it means to assassinate a German diplomat." That which had not been ordered by the authorities was also carried out, and nothing was said about that which was carried out. ये भी हो रहा है। ये मैं फिर से पढ़ने जा रहा हूँ क्या लिख रहा है ये। That which had not been ordered by the authorities was also carried out, and nothing was said about that which was carried out. As simple as that. ठीक है? There was a silence which lay over the land like a suffocating blanket. This was done by managing the press. There was a binding agreement that wherever Hitler went, the press would not ask him questions about the violence that had been unleashed against the Jews. ये कुछ कॉमन नहीं है ये लाइन किसी के रिलेटेड. Hitler was to remain silent so that his image in the world would not be tarnished. Hitler had become enamored by the German mob, for the mob had been tailored to his needs. And inspired by the mob, Hitler passed a unique new law. Jews would have to themselves pay for the damage caused to them. Hitler passed a unique new law. Jews would have to themselves pay for the damage caused to them, as if they had themselves set their shops and houses on fire. When the mob creates its own empire, evil principles begin to rule hearts and minds. The success of the Nazi regime in its murderous campaign was largely because of the propaganda. Only one singular narrative was stated and promoted in every which way. Any other narrative was also not allowed to exist at all. ये भी हो रहा है. People were steadily molded by the propaganda, and they did not realize that they had been transformed into a weapon. Propaganda has only one purpose: the construction of a mob. It is the mob which carries out the killings and blood splatters the clothes of only those who make up the mob. The government and the leaders all appear blameless. No one questions the role of the propaganda in bringing mobs together, and no one investigates the kind of the poison that fills the minds of the people in those mobs. Radicalization encountered no opposition of any weight. I found this profound and chilling sentence in one of the books I read to understand the story of the Crystal Knight. Chilling because I realized that it was yet another way in which the history keeps repeating itself. No one protested against Hitler's mob army in any way. The common people kept expressing their shame and regret about all that had happened because but also kept describing themselves as having been helpless. Those who could speak kept quiet. The church, which teaches thou shalt love thy neighbor, was quiet too. Many countries of the world refuse to give shelter to fleeing Jews. Isn't that what happens everywhere, even today? Walaikum assalam, Anthi. It is thus my fervent prayer that we stop to think about the nature of violence. We must understand that the world is still culpable for what happened to the Jews. Whatever image Israel presently has as a country which Palestine accuses of cruelty and of being a perpetrator of massacres, and perhaps as we think carefully, we will find out why it is that a society which has endured several violence seeks to inflict as severe or even worse violence upon others. And we will also see more clearly than ever why Mahatma Gandhi laid such stress upon ahimsa. Non-violence is the only way out of the black cycle of hatred. It's the only way in which we can look out in the world and find it colored in the singular love. We must also strive to understand the nature of the mobs. A mob has its own constitution, it has its own country, it drafts its own orders and directives and identifies its own praise. And knowing the nature of the mobs, we must resolve to allow institutions to complete their duties of investigation and accountability. We must accept with patience and conviction that they who are accused will be investigated and punished. To become a mob at any place, at any time, is to become Hitler's Germany. Being the People. In 2014, a new national curriculum was launched, and the laptop media, Godi Media, has been working on overtime to help to implement it. Although the overall theme remains the same, the chapters vary. Every evening is devoted to one or the other. Khichdi biryani, Taj Mandir, Taj Mahal Mandir, Nehru versus Patel, Bose versus Nehru, Triple Talaq, Akbar, Aurangzeb, Rani Padmavati, the tallest statue in the world, and a variety of great men who are brought into and taken. You can add them to hijab, azan. देखिए ना मतलब रवीश ने कैसे पहले ही प्रिडिक्ट कर दिया था and a variety of great men who are brought into and taken out of the curriculum when the imagination fails. It feels as if the entire nation is sitting in a history class and all of us are studying history for the very first time. The troll, the buck, and the news anchors are our historians, and the news anchors above all. The national level lectures of the news anchors have one basic idea. All of them have latched onto the notion that some great man or the other has been ignored, wiped out of the history, and we must ensure that almost always a he gets the recognition he has been denied. His aspirations will finally be fulfilled, but he is long gone. He is just a pretext of fulfilling the aspirations of those who have set the curriculum and those who disseminate it. The moment we start wondering what is going on, Pat comes a mention of Chanakya on WhatsApp. He is the showstopper, the benchmark of all professorship in our new national curriculum. Anything goes in his name, especially on issues pertaining to history, war, statecraft, and politics. If you want to say something that has no basis in fact, attribute it to Chanakya. People will fall for it hook, line, and sinker. Be sure to add a sprinkling of Keja words like the notion and yes, valor, catchwords that are connected to the idea of physical bravery and sundry things that go with it. Then start sharing your nugget. The entire political debate taking place in our midst is built around the national curriculum. We are under the impression that by means of this curriculum we are being connected to history, when in fact we are being deviously cut off from it. We are being stripped of history. The process of writing history does not proceed in single straight line. This process does not end at any specific point. It is always a work in progress. One book prompts 10 more publications. One piece of research is challenged by never once. There is no one Marxist or left history that comes straight out of the party headquarters as a clear line in bold letters. In contrast, right wing history clearly seems to emerge from one source. If you want me to come with you to our library to prove what I have just said, I am prepared to do so. History writing is marked by constant change and churn. It has stepped out of the lives of the kings and queens and great men to grasp the nonce of regular lives and our everyday achievements. It has tried to understand history in the context of how we live, how we view the times we live in. The attempt has been to make history writing a well rounded exercise. To the extent it is supported by the documentary and other archival material. New Now, once again, there is a move to drag history writing back to the chronicles of kings and queens. It is a reckless myth making fueled by the idea of retribution. The faithful, the true Hindus, will avenge the deeds, real and imagined, of those who are no longer in our midst. The idea of vengeance persists even though those who exist in the present have nothing to do with that history and are responsible, not responsible for any of it. Through these narratives of the new national curriculum, young hearts are being filled with the flames of the hatred. They are being transformed into human bombs walking into the midst. Communalism turns human beings into bombs. We will see this change not just in our neighbor's child, but also in our own. When a youth filled with pure hatred chances upon an ordinary quarrel between two individuals who happen to be from different faiths. He can only see that the incident with a communal eye and explode human bomb that he is. He becomes a participant in the act of killing, part of the crowd that kills Pehlu Khan or Muhammad Akhlaq or Junaid Khan, knowing that he will be never punished by the powers that he has over him. This is the kind of the human bomb we have in our midst today. We are no longer a weak hearted people. Now that 1200 years of slavery and 60 years of secularism and bad governance are behind us, we have produced our own jihadi John who hacks and burns a man to death and releases the video on the internet. As these human bombs increase in the number, ये बिल्कुल जो इन्होंने लिखा है ना, मैं क्या ही कहूँ, गौर से सुनिए ये क्या कह रहे हैं। और आगे जो आने वाला है ना, इनकी बुक को आप चूमेंगे और कहेंगे इन्होंने प्रोफेसी की थी। As these human bombs increase in numbers in any society or nation, it is not the state that stands to lose, but all of us. Our status and the power of citizens will correspondingly shrink. When we watch television images of a person up, beaten to pulp by a crowd, he may be of any religion. The moment at which the victim is overpowered by the crowd leaves us shaken and afraid, even though we are watching the news in the safety of our home. We are wary of sharing our feelings on Facebook and hesitate to step out of the house at certain times. We feel intimidated, and our civil rights as citizens get eroded. Our minds are being filled with hatred not only for the sole purpose of perpetuating the hold of the particular party or ideology on power, but to ensure that the complete decimation of the power that comes with being the citizens of the democracy. I earnestly urge you to keep your child safe from the ill effects of the new national curriculum on social media and the primetime television, and keep yourself out of its reach as well. The national curriculum is violent in its theme and unrelenting. It has a predictable pattern. Wherever there is an election, it makes its presence felt. All of us need to have self confidence that it is part of the consciousness of being the people of a strong civilization, a rich and a diverse culture. Just as justice and injustice are part of our system, so it was in the past. We need to learn to deal with it. We should know how to negotiate history, but these debates are pushing us to the farthest extremes. Consequently, we are moving inexorably towards communalization, an ever widening gulf of mistrust with regard to a particular community. In schools all over Germany, children are educated on how to deal with the blot on their past because of the Hitler and his Nazi regime, one of the most evil in all history. This is a stigma. This is a stigma that cannot be removed either by tearing out or burning these pages of history, or running away or hiding from it. I once asked a German journalist if they were overcome by a sense of guilt. Mentioning that politicians in my country didn't think twice about casually branding anybody as Hitler, I asked her if that there was so in Germany as well. She replied, "We are very careful about how we bring Hitler's name into any debate. Only an individual who loses the ability to offer a reasoned and human argument is thought to possess a Hitlerian streak." She recalled that around the time the film Schindler's List, set in Nazi Germany, was released, their children spoke to them. This is what the teacher said. The film dwells on the darkest chapter in the history of our nation. Yes, it did happen, but we are not to blame, neither your father nor mine. We ought to be ashamed of this dark chapter of our history, and we are, but when we watch the film, we shall not be racked by guilt or anger. Rather, we shall experience a sense of self confidence that we are no longer trapped in that time. We have come a long way from that juncture and are living in a new age. We in India have not educated our citizens on ways to negotiate history. On the contrary, the narrative that has been created as a tradition, especially through our television channels, is one of humanity. Perhaps many will dismiss these words of caution, calling me alarmist. But there will come a time But there will come a time. But there will come a time when we will recall these words of distrust. If not for ourselves, then for our children. For no one among us wants to see our children pick up the sword or to kill a neighbor. Our child may well be saved by the party he owes allegiance to, but we will not get a moment's sleep knowing that our child is a murderer. When Pehlu Khan was lynched in Alwar, there was little reaction on the part of the society and none from the government. When Junaid Khan was killed on a crowded railway platform, no one came to his aid, and later there were no witness. Everyone claimed to have been somewhere else, or busy with something so consuming that the cries of a man being butchered and his brothers being did not reach them. Examine, huh. Examine the damage that was done. Two men died in terror and in unimaginable pain. If that does not matter to us, do we think that those who killed and will not be punished? How many were there? 8, 10, 20? We don't know. We make no effort to know. Those men, they must have gone home after they killed. What food did they eat that evening? Who cooked it for them? How many greeted them in their mohallas the next morning? There are 8, 10, 20 murderers roaming freely in our society. In another year, there may be 800 or 20,000. Murder will be normal then. It will be like any other job, like weaving beautiful carpet or sari, driving a car, tending a garden, writing software, or nursing the sick. Killers will emerge among us and kill and come back home after a day's work. They might be our children and our siblings, our husbands and wives. Have we agreed to this? When we cast our vote, was this the world we chose? Let us not turn away from what is happening. The future is grim. Due to the ongoing poisonous Hindu Muslim discourse, human bombs are being prepared in large numbers. Out of hatred among Hindus and out of the sheer fear among the Muslims, our society is poised to reach its nadir. It's in places with dense population, communalism will incubate more human bombs. There are many ways to falsify history. During the West Bengal elections of 2016, we saw new wonders of the national curriculum unfold. In no time at all, the Netaji films were exhumed from the central government archives and aired, and an impression was created that one of the icons of our freedom movement, Subhash Chandra Bose, had been denied his place in history until now and that he would now be given his due. It did not matter that almost every child in India knows of him, that he has found a prominent place in the national narrative and in textbooks across the country for decades, and his pictures have adorned millions of homes and offices. For days, we heard of Netaji for his new champions, many of whom with him before, had never bothered with him before. Sometimes he was pitted against Nehru and other times in opposition to other leaders. There was a chorus of concern for Netaji. But once the BJP lost the state election, he was consigned to oblivion. This kind of misuse of history must be avoided at all costs. By all means, visit a library to know about the ups and downs in the relationship between Nehru and Bose. However, you look towards a television studio debate to learn more about their equation, be warned that the numerous pitfalls await you, prime among them being an anchor who doesn't have the time to read two newspapers a day or a single book in an entire year but becomes a historian by night, destroying your mind on a daily basis. This is not an issue that is limited to our times, but concerns future generations as well. We have managed to come this far without much mishap, but how many will now fall into the many pits being dug all around in front of our eyes? I cannot say. What I can say is that it is not you and I alone who will fall into these traps and will be condemned to seeing our children being ensnared, and injured. The children will dandle on our laps, wishing them a bright future. There are many new heroes who emerge these days, fully formed with entire mythological mythologies of physical bravery and success, and make a grand entry into the politics dressed to kill. They went to wipe out the past, rewrite it in their own image. They think they are creating history in the present, whereas history has scripted the present of the likes of them a long time ago. Try as they might, they cannot change it. They will be exposed. And we only need to keep our eyes and ears open. If we learn to negotiate the past, we will no longer be perplexed or fooled by the present. For instance, there was no need to invoke the name of Sardar Patel during the Gujarat elections of late 2017. His name had already been used during the Lok Sabha elections 2014. Except that this time around, his name was being used liberally to placate the disgruntled Patel community of the state. Did it work? We don't know. But I humbly submit to the Patel community, Sardar is too big a statesman to belong to one group, to be dragged into the arena of the cynical politics. A narrative has been built about the animosity between Sardar Patel and Nehru, the latter being the villain. But if the new heroes of our nation would care to listen, I would tell them if you read the correspondence between Nehru and Sardar and dispassionate regards of their relationships, your eyes will well up. If such friends, such co travelers were to become a part of your life, you would be blessed indeed. If you can be Nehru to someone and that person can be Patel to you, know that you have earned the world's most precious riches. But if your deeds have but if by your deeds you have repudiated the legacy of the very person you hail as Sardar, if you have appropriated him and reduced him to a 182-meter statue, you have lost everything. Some 40-50 years after Sardar Patel, we saw one more Sardar come and go into Indian politics. In between, he rode a Ra. He too was called Loh Purush, Iron Man. He too set out to control and transform India, but is not to be seen opening his mouth these days. History can be like that too. To come back to Nehru and Patel, the immense respect they had for each other and their friendship ought to be compulsory reading for those studying politics. How, in spite of differing viewpoints, they continue to respect each other in what should be taught in classrooms. Not that Nehru and Patel destroyed each other's lives and aspirations. No, it was not so. In Indian politics, there can not be a bigger example of two statesmen, two individuals foregoing in path of an accord in the midst of differences. An attempt is being made to erase that history, but the attempt will not succeed for the simple reason that someone has lived that history. How can that which has been lived be obliterated? The above mentioned instances are not mere tactics of one upmanship in the battle between two political parties. They are part of a careful strategy to exert control over us, to seize and occupy our minds. For when we start looking at the present and the past with their gaze, we will no longer be ourselves. Slowly but surely, we are being molded into the people who can be easily controlled by means of routine mechanisms of authority. A lapdog media, biased textbooks, IT cells, Aadhaar number. Organizations based on caste, religion, and intolerant politics are increasing their strangle hold on the history. मैं थक गया. I think this should be it. कितना टाइम हो गया? 1 hour. थोड़ा सा और पढ़ते हैं फिर रहने देते हैं. Tearing down a few posters, ransacking libraries and the cinema halls suffice for leaders of the organizations to become historians. Burning history books present a way of becoming a part of the history, as does the act of the filing an FIR against the writer. Most of all, if you know the way to the neighborhood of the person you have been taught to see as the other, if you walk there with flashing eyes, even a stick in your hand, you are a part of the history and the historian. This wonder of wonders can only be accomplished in India, not in other places. In other countries, you have to spend 5 to 10 years of your life researching one tiny part of a particular subject before you can earn the right to be called a historian. In this new and restless India, however, anyone who shreds a few posters and at crossroads becomes a historian. One is always a little anxious these days. Anyone with a desire to become a historian bubbling inside him can take offense. The rich and the powerful politicians and the industrialists are alike have even thinner skins. Many well wishers advise me to be careful with my words. I often forget their advice, but I haven't yet said anything that would prompt an advocate or attorney general to take a day off to file a case. Feeling the urgent need to get a gag order against me, I am certainly not going to speak about those who grow their revenue 16,000 fold in a single year. Who knows? I might end up losing 16,000 times the amount I am likely to earn in this lifetime. So I usually try to ensure no big fish suffers a loss of their reputation by what I say, and I do not suffer a loss of such wealth as I shall never own. If any of the big fish still want to file a defamation suit against me, I have a small request to make. Please do not slap a lawsuit of rupees 100 crore on me. By all means, file a suit, but let it be in the range of sawa rupaya, one and a quarter rupee. After all, an offering a sawa rupaya is enough to please our gods. I am imagining an India where nobody will suffer a loss of reputation worth more than Sawa Rupaya. Even if the oceanic gap between the poor and the rich becomes wider, like the chasm between the rotis, two rotis, and 20 cakes, let there be no disparity in the matter of measuring loss of reputation. May there be one measure of defamation for everybody, namely Sawa Rupaya. The work of lawyers will become much easier, and the law minister too will get an opportunity to attend some other work. In the interest of democracy and freedom, I have coined a slogan: one reputation, one loss, one nation, one reputation, Sawa Rupaya, respect for all. It is very feudal that this law of defamation, the powerful and the rich have begun to make liberal use of this law. Have you ever heard of the poor claim that their reputation has been damaged? Have you heard any poor man say, "You have not given me the minimum support price. You have brought me to a point where, out of sheer remorse that I have not been able to pay off my loans, I can only commit suicide. So I am going to hang myself. You are responsible for the great shame of reneging on my loans and not being able to look after my family. I will file a suit case against you for causing a loss of reputation." But the rich and the powerful use the law of defamation without compunction to intimidate us, the citizens. It's a law which reduces the status of the people in democracy. First, the powerful lot intimidate us through their use of history. Then they use a law of defamation to do the same. This later tactic has a particular advantage. No revealing light will ever reach those dark corners which hide secrets, because how many have the strength to withstand the threat of a rupees 100 crore defamation suit? As it is, big corporates use this law to keep themselves out of the media's reach. Particularly, no one speaks out against them. If you email them detailing the charge leveled against them and ask them for a response, there is none forthcoming. What does come your way is a legal notice from them. It is exactly this immunity from the legitimate questions that political parties are now seeking for themselves. The hurt caused to them, to their reputation and prestige of those in power, seems to be so severe that they feel the need to file defamation suits on any and every little matter. And they call themselves the guiding lights of democracy. This is nothing but a design to wear the people out so that they remain powerless and against the cozy relationships building up between the mainstream media, big corporate houses, and politicians. Recently, Rajasthan came perilously close to enacting a law, the proposed criminal laws Rajasthan Amendment Bill 2017, to stop anyone from reporting on corruption charges against public servants, magistrates, and judges. Fortunately, the citizens and the journalists of the state rose in protest. Had they not spoken out now, they would never have been able to speak. Rajasthan Patrika especially took a courageous stand with the editor of the Gulab Kothari, saying his piece immediately in a front page editorial that minced no words. His paper would boycott the chief minister until she revoked the ordinance. Some days later, Gulab Kothari left the editorial column blank. It is a powerful symbolic act, for it carried the echoes for the emergency. The reason we should be vigilant on hearing these echoes anywhere is simple. The emergency was a dark phase in our history and should never be repeated. If that period were to be repeated, as sometimes seems likely, then this time around our essence and consciousness of being the people will be completely erased. The power of the people is being eroded not just in India but around the world. Hundreds of the journalists have been sent to prison, not just in countries like China and Saudi Arabia, which have been a long history of persecuting journalists, but also in Russia, Turkey, Egypt, Syria, Philippines, Argentina, Ukraine, Mexico, the United States of America, as governments are increasingly establishing their control over the world of communication. That was exactly what the Rajasthan government tried to do. Had the law been enacted, the journalists would have virtually become bonded labor. In the age of lapdog media, in any case, the most media organizations have jumped happily into the lap of power. However, However, the system is ruthless. It can choke the eager to please a child without missing a beat. In our democracy today, the political system overwhelmingly dominates the citizen. Our power is weakening. Consequently, while all leaders are being elevated to the position of veritable avatars, the people of are being relegated to the category of criminals. If you pose a question, you are branded as anti-national and taken to task. How dare you question the avatar push, the incarnation of the mightiest God? Campaigns are unleashed against you on social media and you are virtually encircled and trolled. In the process, you start becoming fearful, telling your children that they are far too visible on Facebook, that they should be less vocal. So, bit by bit, we surrender the little space we occupy as citizens. The more we cede that space, the more we enfeeble ourselves. It's not desirable that everybody to support one political ideology. It is important to have plurality of parties and ideologies, and we as the people should have the confidence that we can deal with it. Essential to the idea of the democracy in understanding of being is an understanding of being the people and staking our claim to democracy. However, when people's consciousness transforms into people's fear, they become mere servants. In a democracy, the people come first in all senses. The system is meant to serve, be answerable to them. But the powers that we are seeking to do is to invert that order so that the system dominates us. Their ultimate aim is to ensure that we swallow our any mumbo jumbo they direct at us. Their aim is perpetual, untrammeled power. To this end, they are engaged in unnerving us with acrimonious debates day after day, so that our daily diet of bellicose TV makes us wonder if there is an all-out war between communities out there, which leads to a deepening mutual suspicion and rancor in society. It also homogenizes the society, forces everyone into the same mold. So anyone who is different, who dresses a little differently, has a different diet, raises a different slogan, worships a different god, is marked, and so we are silenced. To prevent anybody from speaking is a form of terrorism too. To create an atmosphere of fear and suspicion is also a form of terrorism. In recent times, a new trend has emerged among citizens, putting their unqualified trust in the leader. They submerge themselves and their aspirations in him completely. This is not a good thing. When a voter merges in the leader, he is no longer the people or even a voter. He is merely the dust swept out by a windstorm. The power that resides in the people must not be frittered away by a film star's fan or cricketers. Be a film star's fan or cricketers, but never be a politician's fan. Respect him, but don't be so hypnotized by his words that you forget to evaluate his work and hold him to the promises that he makes. You do not elect him or her to make stunning economic well being. Your loyalty on a personal level can be towards any leader and any political party. There is also no problem at all if you are a party worker. But as long as you consider yourself as a citizen of the country, your conduct should be that of a citizen. The task of demanding answers with impartiality and without prejudice is yours and overrides any obligation to an organization. If you behave like the agent of the political party or religious or cultural organization, you will destroy this democracy. It's your responsibility that after you vote a party into power, you step back and become impartial once more. If you think something is right and good, call it so. And if something is wrong, call it so. We are already suffering the consequences that follow the erosion of our status as citizens, for which we too must share the blame. We are living in a perpetual state of uncertainty, wondering about the safe limits within which we can air our differences with authority, without becoming or being branded as dissenters. It had become a pattern that a person, once one is talking to, is invariably at pains to clarify, "No, I am not a dissenter." My response to that is, "So what if you are? I understand if you say you are not a Krodhi, resentful. I respect that. But you feel ashamed of calling yourself a Virodhi, dissenter? Is it written anywhere in our Shastras that having different opinions is prohibited? Truth be told, if you say you are not an objector, you are ranged against democracy. If you have a different point of view, say you are a dissenter, post 10 things on Facebook daily and say openly, yes, I have a difference of opinion. Being an objector is no crime. If we are not vigilant about our rights in a democracy, it does not matter how much bone vita and chawanprash we consume. It is time to stop looking at all sorts of excuses for our lack of strength and powerfulness and face the reality that this enfeeblement of citizens has come about being because we have abandoned dissent and turned to supplication. There's a world of difference between the two. The process of supplication is quite similar to the act of propitiation, typical of a bhakt, a devotee. The gods are angry, they need to be placated. They are bound to hear us eventually. All we have to do is to draw their attention towards us. Take the trader because fraternity of Surat, which kept up its demonstrations against the demonetization and GST for almost 6 months in 2017, suffering considerable economic losses in the process. I observed them quite closely. Closely. Whenever and wherever they came out to demonstrate, their numbers were impressive. However, and this is the interesting bit, instead of protesting, they were adopting a posture of entreaty. The Surat traders were putting forward their demands as devotees, sing Sai bhajans in full rhyme. Now, nowhere were any slogans raised. Cries of Zindabad or Murdabad, Ho Barbad are so commonplace in a democracy that they are hurled at politicians at all time without a moment's hesitation. But no such slogans were heard in the markets and streets of Surat. Only the number of the bodies suggested that there was a kind of protest going on. When no longer remained the people, we are reduced to being just numbers. The movement had no impact whatsoever. The way the traders saw it, the movement failed because the union finance minister did not pay heed to their demands. In reality, their inability to see themselves as citizens was the sole reason for their campaign's failure. Some time ago, in Delhi, I received a phone call from a lady who told me that, alarmed by the rising levels of the pollution in the city, she had been spurred into action. Now she wanted me to highlight the issue of pollution in my show and mention her work as well. She was convinced that if 10 or 15 television news channels highlighted her endeavor, which involved school children as well, it would have an impact. I pointed out to her that the serious problem of pollution was receiving steady coverage already. If her efforts were not having the desired impact, she needed to examine her approach. The lady thought I was a pessimist. I urged her to continue her efforts and never give up, to which she said, "We are protesting so hard, all I want is to draw the attention of the Prime Minister." So that there it was again, entreaty, supplication. Sing bhajans at the supreme leader's door till he turns his attention to you. If at all, and designed to solve your problem, see how crystal clear the approach of Ravish is. If you see the Sikh protests, obviously the Kisan protests, उन्होंने कैसे फतेह पाई? Not because they sung the bhajans for supreme leader. They were vehemently against the government. Then and only then repealment of the law took place. It is, I think, for the first time in the history जो ऐसा हुआ है मतलब बीजेपी की हिस्ट्री में तो इसके बाद approach the prime minister and say, it is a bhakt you want to be. There is an elaborate system of crores of gods and goddesses in the Hindu religion. If perchance you are unable to locate the nearest deity, worship a tree. Hinduism can be liberal that way. Finally, I wrote that lady a letter. What you are doing is neither inadequate nor wrong. In fact, you are doing more than you share. Not just you, many people who are worked up about various issues are engaged in similar efforts. Their questions are valid too, for they are about life and death issues. But none of these efforts is having an impact. The list of unproductive movements by citizens is becoming longer by the day, and even if several more were to be added to the list, it would make no difference to the system or ministers of the government. In a couple of instances, they may even agree to some demands, but after a point, no progress is ever made. For the last 4 years, Delhi has been in the grip of serious health hazard. From small children to the elderly, everyone is at risk and their lungs are getting damaged. This is an issue by itself. It does not have to be made into one. Ma'am, all this is happening because the real power of the people is no longer yours. If, as a fan or blind supporter, you, like so many others, have unreservedly put your entire trust in a leader after the election, then you are no longer the citizen of a democracy. When you forsake that mental to don the mask of the leader, sport his tattoo on your cheek, merge in him, and become his reflection, the power you yield as the people goes. This is why you and others find it difficult to understand why your efforts are not making any headway whatsoever. In the last 4 or 5 years, Delhi's air quality has gone from bad to hazardous. Yet no movement has made the slightest difference. The ideology and the reflection of the leader is lodged within you, and as long as you don't make efforts to separate yourself from the persona, you will not become part of the people. That is why you are being able to grasp the reason for your lack of impact. Farmers face bullets. They hang themselves. Does it affect you? Every day in every state, farmers are facing ruin. Has it roused you to action? College after college is devoid of teachers. Do you really care? When we as the people do not support our own, do not care about the problems, how will our words about anything have any impact? Just as you were silent in someone's hour of need, so someone is silent in your time of need. Therefore, I say exercise your right to speak out. If others speak for their rights, add your voice to theirs. You you become the people only when you speak out and express solidarity. Whenever others raise their voice, encourage them, even if you do not always agree with their endeavor, support them to the extent that they are able to speak and others are able to hear them out. Each one of us is fighting a lone battle today. It is proving difficult to extend any struggle beyond a certain limit. Citizens are betraying fellow citizens. As for the system, deviousness is an inherent part of its makeup. And by not amusing the stress of the people, we are just making its task easier. What is novel is the way in which the system is pinning you down in a Hindu Muslim framework. Pahlu Khan, Akhlaq, and Junaid, who were killed, were not Muslims, they were citizens. In Kerala, when RSS workers were killed and CPM workers are killed in retaliation, and vice versa, those who die are not Hindus or communists, but citizens. Therefore, speak out, support your fellow citizens. Any extreme manifestation of the politics there thrives upon division and distrust in the society. It ultimately diminishes the seasons, depriving them of the essence and consciousness of being the people. It is for these reasons I say, ma'am, your effort is honest but ineffective. Sure, enough. Delhi's media soon shifted its focus to the issue of Rani Padmavati, who may or may not have existed, and a film made on her the story, gasping 5 and 55 years older, were forgotten. It was back to manufacturing history, demonizing the Muslims, and celebrating the Hindu valor for which women must burn. The Hindu Muslim framework has become the sole benchmark for any and every issue. Bogus nationalism is another. These frameworks have become so entrenched that it is now not going to be an easy task to extricate ourselves from them. We will have to work very hard at it. We will think about the people in democracy in a breeze. On the contrary, it takes more hard work than is required to get through an IIT entrance exam. We do not become the people so easily or for free. The manner in which our youth are being seduced into a life of materialistic enslavement, they will be reduced to being mere cogs in the system for the next 20 to 25 years, perhaps 50. They will not be able, they will not be the people anymore. India will not be a democracy. And mark my words, and mark his words as well. ये कह रहा है ना ये हवा में नहीं कह रहा है. Power has a hundred words. Power has 100 ways to terrorize people. The easiest way is to slap a case of sedition against you, or to arrest you for saying, writing, or increasingly now sharing anything deemed objectionable. This is happening across India. In state after state, it has become an epidemic. It has become an epidemic since the present government came to power. But the trend is neither new or nor exclusive to the BJP. Duly elected governments have been making the ordinary citizens defenseless for some years now. From Tamil Nadu to Uttar Pradesh, first they pit the crowd against you, and then the police and the lawyers, and finally they to keep the fear of the prison alive, the British constructed the cellular jail in Andaman's Kalapani, the terrible prison in the Black Waters. But Gandhi had so ended the fear of the prisons that people were not intimidated and went there too. Some of them apologized to the British authorities, pleading to be released, but I won't dismiss that their claim to being revolutionaries. Prisons are like that. They break your spirit. Our governments today know this well. Therefore, I say just as there is a provision of anticipatory bail, there should be a provision of anticipatory jail. Then one can voluntarily petition the court. My lords, since I have an apprehension and summer vacations are around the corner, I would like to spend the next 2 months in jail. Later, if the government hoists a false case upon me, please subtract the duration already spent in jail from the term. This is really crazy. Till now, many of us have abstained from speaking out because we are afraid it could land us in prison. How about starting a campaign? On such and such date, we would like to go to a prison just like that. Let us all pack our lunch boxes with a couple of dry parathas to last us a couple of days each and spend 2 or 3 days in jail so that the fear of false cases and prison terms entrenched in society is uprooted down with fear. If we consider ourselves followers of Gandhi, we must ask for the introduction of the provision of anticipatory jail so that we liberate ourselves from the yoke of the fear. Is my suggestion too radical? Am I losing my bearings? If you think I am, let me share with you just a list of cases. It might be it might seem a bit boring, but bear with me. You will remember most of these cases, you will have heard of them. But reading them together is instructive. It puts them in perspective. In April 2012, a professor was arrested in West Bengal because he posted a cartoon that critiqued the Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee. In May 2012, two Indian Air India employees were arrested for objectionable posters against the then Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. And in November 2012, two girls, Shaheen and Renu, were arrested for their posters on social media questioning the way Mumbai was brought to a standstill on the day of the Shiv Sena chief Bal Thackeray's funeral. In May 2000, Modi. The charge against him क्या था? Promoting communal and social disharmony. Politicians and intelligent news anchors who do not exactly this day in and day out are never booked or interrogated. In March 2015, a student of class ninth was arrested in UP for commenting against Azam Khan, a senior leader of the Samajwadi Party, which was in power at that time. In November 2016, a 19-year-old RTI activist was arrested in Madhya Pradesh for a post criticizing the Prime Minister and the state's Chief Minister for demonetization. In March 2017, seven people were arrested in UP within hours of Yogi Adityanath swearing in as Chief Minister for objectionable posters about him. In May 2017, Karnataka police arrested two youth for putting up a post with morphed picture of the PM Modi, which, according to the complainant, no relation to the of the PM himself, made him look so obscene and ugly. Soon after this, the administration of in far off Varanasi, the Prime Minister's constituency issued a notice that sharing rumors or falsehood would be arrested. The falsehood about India's first Prime Minister, Nehru, have resulted in no arrests. Not long ago, Amit Malviya of the BJP's IT cell, posted a tweet about Nehru hugging several women. Since when was hugging a woman become a bad thing? It turned out that one of the women was Nehru's sister. The other was his niece. In October 2017, cases were filed against 22 businessmen in Kanpur, of whom one was arrested. Their crime, putting the image of the prime minister alongside that of the North Korea supposedly lunatic supreme leader Kim Jong Un. In October 2017, a fan of the Tamil star Vijay was arrested for making derogatory comments against the Prime Minister Modi. In October 2017, again, 18-year-old Zakir Ali Tyagi was imprisoned in UP for 42 days alongside hardened criminals for a Facebook post where he made light of a court order that had declared the Ganga a legal entity and called the BJP government's promise to build a Mandir a gimmick. This is only a short list. In the course of their political careers, the politicians face a great deal of criticism. Their opponents denigrate them to their faces, not even behind their backs, and in the choicest of the language, they do not arrest one another for these insults. Invariably, it's someone from among us that the police come for. I think this is more than enough. आज के लिए. Okay. So we have almost completed 70-80% of this book. Are we going on? या आप सब सो गए? This is so. पानी पी लो. हाँ, तो मैं ये कह रहा हूँ कि मतलब you just see किस तरह से लिखी गई है ये बुक. इतना ही कहना चाहूँगा, ज़्यादा नहीं, वरना इंटरनेशनल कहा जाएगा और जेल हो जाएगी. So are we here? निकले क्या अब, या रूमी को पढ़े? जल्दी बता दीजिए क्या करना है. Should we end? Oh, it's 12:17. आज तो बहुत बहुत लेट हो गया. आई एम रियली सॉरी गाइस. मुझे ख्याल तक नहीं आया 12:17 हो गए. टेक केयर एवरीवन. सो जाइए. आई गेस सब सो ही गए होंगे. जॉन का पढ़ें कुछ. चलिए ठीक है, जॉन का कुछ पढ़ता हूँ, उसके बाद मैं सो जाता हूँ. उसके बाद मैं बंद कर लेता हूँ, सो जाता हूँ. नहीं, फरमाते हैं कि ये गम क्या दिल की आदत है, नहीं तो. ये गम क्या दिल की आदत है, नहीं तो. किसी से कुछ शिकायत है, नहीं तो. ये गम क्या दिल की आदत है, नहीं तो. किसी से कुछ शिकायत है, नहीं तो. है वो एक ख्वाब बेताबीर, उसको भुला देने की नीयत है, नहीं तो. किसी के बिन, किसी की याद के बिन जिए जाने की हिम्मत है, नहीं तो. किसी सूरत भी दिल लगता नहीं. हाँ, किसी सूरत भी दिल लगता नहीं. हाँ, तो कुछ दिन से ये हालत है, नहीं तो. तुझे जिसने कहीं का भी न रखा, वो एक जात सी वहशत है, नहीं तो. तेरे इस हाल पर है सबको हैरत, तुझे भी इस पे हैरत है, नहीं तो. हम आहंगी नहीं दुनिया से तेरी, तुझे इस पर नदामत है, नहीं तो. हुआ जो कुछ यही मकसूम था क्या, हुआ जो कुछ यही मकसूम था क्या, यही सारी हिकायत है, नहीं तो. अजियत नाक उम्मीदों से तुझको, अजियत नाक उम्मीदों से तुझको अमान पाने की हसरत है, नहीं तो. तू रहता है ख्यालो ख्वाब में गुम, तो इसकी वजह फुर्सत है, नहीं तो. वहां वालों से है इतनी मोहब्बत, यहाँ वालों से नफरत है, नहीं तो. सबब जो इस जुदाई का बना है, वो मुझसे खूबसूरत है, नहीं. ये गम क्या दिल की आदत है, नहीं. किसी से कुछ शिकायत है, नहीं तो. इसका रिकॉर्डेड भी आपको मिल जाएगा, चैनल पे ही है. मैंने वो इसी मोबाइल से ही रिकॉर्ड किया था. अच्छा नहीं है वो. आई विल बी रिकॉर्डिंग एवरी पॉइंट अगेन, वो जितनी भी पॉइंट जॉन की है. बाकी अभी थोड़ा टाइम दे मुझे, उसके बाद आई विल बी डूइंग इट. चलिए, टेक केयर. इतना आज काफ़ी था। थैंक यू सो मच, आप सब यहाँ आए, आपने सुना, यू गिवन योर टाइम, दिस इज़ मोर देन इनफ। टेक केयर एवरीवन। जॉन की रम्स नहीं, अब इतना काफ़ी है, लेट हो गए हैं बहुत। टेक केयर, टेक केयर, टेक केयर।